The crystal chandeliers of a luxury Manhattan wedding hall shimmered as hundreds of wealthy guests laughed, clinked glasses, and whispered behind their designer smiles. But in the corner stood a young woman in a simple black dress, a waitress holding a silver tray. Someone laughed loudly. "Relax, sweetheart. You're just a waitress. Serve the drinks and stay invisible." The entire table burst into quiet chuckles. The girl lowered her eyes. But inside her chest something burned hotter than the champagne they were drinking. Because none of them knew the truth. They didn't know that the quiet waitress standing beside them had built something powerful in silence, something that could destroy reputations in seconds. And they definitely didn't know that before the wedding night ended. The whole internet would know their names. By midnight, the same people who mocked her would be begging her for forgiveness. But it was already too late. Because the girl they humiliated in New York that night was Aurora Vance. And her revenge was about to go viral. New York City never sleeps, but for Aurora Vance, the nights were the hardest. Every evening she tied her dark hair into a neat ponytail, slipped into a black waitress uniform, and stepped into the glittering chaos of Manhattan's elite restaurants and event halls. The wealthy laughed over $1,000 wine while she carried trays of food worth more than her entire weekly paycheck. To them, she was invisible. Just another waitress. But Aurora had learned something important about invisibility. When people underestimate you, they stop watching. Aurora grew up in Brooklyn in a small apartment above a laundromat. Her mother worked double shifts as a nurse, and her father had disappeared when she was 8. Money was always tight, but her mother taught her one lesson she would never forget. "People may see what you are today," her mother would say softly, "but only you know who you will become." Aurora believed those words with a quiet stubbornness. In high school, she was the girl who stayed late in the library while everyone else went to parties. She studied coding on an old laptop that froze every 20 minutes. She watched free online business lectures at night while eating cheap ramen noodles. No one noticed. But Aurora wasn't dreaming small. She was building something. By the time she turned 23, she was working 2 jobs. A morning shift at a coffee shop and nights as a waitress at high-end Manhattan events. Every dollar she earned went into one thing, her secret project. A social media platform that exposed corporate corruption. Aurora had seen too much injustice growing up. Powerful people destroyed small lives without consequences. She wanted to change that. So for 3 years she coded in silence. 3 years of sleepless nights. 3 years of rejection. Investors laughed at her emails. Tech companies ignored her pitches. One venture capitalist even told her bluntly, "Sweetheart, tech startups are not for waitresses." Aurora never replied. Instead, she kept working. And slowly, her platform began to grow. At first it was tiny. A few thousand users. Then journalists discovered it. Then whistleblowers started uploading documents. Within months the platform gained traction. Still, Aurora stayed invisible. She never revealed herself as the founder. Officially, the company was owned by a small anonymous tech firm registered under a legal trust. Only 2 lawyers knew the truth. Aurora Vance was the CEO. But during the day, she was still a waitress. And that was exactly how she wanted it. Because powerful people spoke freely around waitresses. They said things they would never say in public. Secrets. Deals. Scandals. Aurora listened to everything. One evening in early autumn, Aurora arrived at one of Manhattan's most luxurious venues. The Grand Regent Hall. A wedding for one of New York's wealthiest families. The guest list included billionaires, politicians, and media tycoons. Aurora's manager whispered as they prepared, "Be careful tonight. These people are powerful." Aurora simply nodded. She picked up a tray of champagne glasses and stepped into the ballroom. Crystal lights shimmered across marble floors. Guests wore designer suits and diamond jewelry that sparkled brighter than the chandeliers above them. Aurora moved quietly between tables. Invisible, until she reached a group near the stage. A tall blonde woman in a red designer dress looked at her with a smirk. "Excuse me," the woman said loudly. "Champagne. And try not to spill it." Aurora handed her a glass calmly. The woman turned to her friends and laughed. God, I love New York. Even the waitresses here look like they tried to be influencers and failed. Laughter spread around the table. Aurora said nothing. Another man leaned back in his chair. Relax. She's just a waitress. Aurora walked away silently. But she remembered their faces. Later that evening, she passed the same table again. This time the conversation changed everything. The blonde woman was whispering to a man in a dark suit. The deal goes through tomorrow. Once the land transfer happens, those families will be forced out. The man chuckled. Brooklyn redevelopment. Thousands of apartments. Easy billions. Aurora froze for half a second. Brooklyn redevelopment. She knew exactly what that meant. Low-income families being pushed out of their homes so luxury towers could replace them. Her own childhood neighborhood. Aurora kept walking, but her mind was racing. She had seen documents about similar deals on her platform before. Corrupt land purchases. Political bribery. And suddenly she realized something shocking. The groom of tonight's wedding was the CEO behind the redevelopment project. Aurora quietly stepped into the kitchen area and pulled out her phone. She logged into the back end of her platform. Thousands of anonymous documents were stored there. And after a few minutes of searching, she found it. Internal contracts, emails, bribe records, everything. The company behind the Brooklyn redevelopment had illegally forced families out of their homes. And the CEO's name appeared everywhere. The groom. Aurora stared at the screen. The same people laughing in that ballroom tonight were responsible for destroying hundreds of lives. Her chest tightened. Then something else happened. A message notification appeared. One of the journalists on her platform had just verified the documents. They were real. Aurora slowly looked back toward the ballroom. The wedding celebration was reaching its peak. The band was playing, guests were dancing, champagne flowed endlessly. They were celebrating their future. Aurora stood in the kitchen doorway holding a silver tray. Still invisible. Still, just a waitress. But now she held something powerful. The truth. And suddenly, a dangerous idea formed in her mind. If the world saw these documents tonight, the scandal would explode. Aurora looked down at her phone again. The publish button glowed softly on the screen. One click. That was all it would take. But Aurora didn't press it yet. Instead, she returned to the ballroom. Because if this story was going to go viral, she wanted everyone there to witness the moment their empire collapsed. And she had the perfect plan. The music in the ballroom grew louder as the wedding reached its grand finale. Aurora moved quietly between the tables, refilling champagne glasses and clearing plates while wealthy guests laughed and toasted to the future of the happy couple. The groom, Nathaniel Caldwell, stood proudly near the stage beside his new bride. Cameras flashed constantly. The Caldwells were one of New York's most powerful real estate families, and tonight's wedding looked less like a celebration and more like a royal event. Aurora watched from the sidelines. Her phone rested silently in her pocket. The evidence was ready. The documents were verified. All she needed was the right moment. Across the room, the blonde woman in the red dress, the same one who had mocked her earlier, waved her over again. Aurora walked to the table with her tray. Another drink, the woman said impatiently. Aurora handed her a fresh glass. The woman smirked again. You know, she said loudly to her friends, I always wonder what waitresses think when they see people like us. Do they feel jealous or just invisible? The table laughed again. Aurora met her eyes calmly. Neither, she said softly. The woman rolled her eyes and turned away. To them, it was just another joke. But Aurora knew something they didn't. In exactly 10 minutes, their world would begin collapsing. The band stopped playing as the wedding host stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced cheerfully, please raise your glasses for a special speech from the groom himself. Applause filled the room. Nathaniel Caldwell took the microphone confidently. Aurora slowly moved toward the back of the hall where a large screen displayed wedding photos for the guests. Her heart beat steadily. This was it. Nathaniel cleared his throat and began speaking. "Tonight is the happiest night of my life," he said proudly. "My family built everything we have through hard work and vision. And tomorrow we begin our biggest project yet, a redevelopment that will transform Brooklyn forever." Aurora's fingers tightened around her phone. The screen behind him still showed smiling pictures of the couple. Nathaniel continued, "We believe in building the future of New York. Bigger, stronger, more profitable." Aurora opened her platform dashboard. The publish button glowed, but she didn't press it yet. Instead, she did something far more devastating. Aurora connected her phone to the event display system. She had learned how these systems worked years ago while helping a friend with tech equipment. A few taps, a few lines of code, and suddenly, the wedding photos on the giant screen disappeared. At first, no one noticed. Nathaniel kept talking. But then the screen changed again. Instead of wedding photos, documents appeared. Contracts, emails, bank transfers. Huge bold headlines flashed across the display. Caldwell Real Estate Illegal Land Seizure Scandal. The ballroom fell silent. Nathaniel stopped speaking. Confused whispers spread across the room. "What is this? Is that real?" More documents appeared on the screen. Proof of bribery. Proof of illegal eviction orders. Proof that hundreds of Brooklyn families were being forced from their homes. Guests pulled out their phones. Within seconds, the information spread across social media. Aurora finally pressed the button. Publish. Her platform released the full investigation online. Journalists received automatic alerts. Breaking news notifications exploded across the internet. And then the final screen appeared behind the stage. A short video clip. Security footage. Nathaniel Caldwell meeting secretly with city officials. Passing envelopes of cash. Gasps filled the ballroom. Nathaniel's face turned pale. "What is this?" he shouted. Panic erupted among the guests. Some rushed toward the exits. Others stared at their phones in disbelief as news websites began reporting the story. The blonde woman at the table looked around nervously. "This has to be fake," she whispered. But it wasn't. Within minutes, the scandal was trending worldwide. Aurora watched everything unfold quietly from the back of the hall. Still holding her tray. Still wearing her waitress uniform. Nathaniel grabbed the microphone again, his voice shaking. "This is sabotage. Someone shut off that screen." But it was too late. Police sirens echoed outside the building. Because the evidence Aurora released wasn't just viral. It was criminal. 2 detectives entered the ballroom with calm authority. The crowd parted instantly. They walked directly toward Nathaniel Caldwell. "Mr. Caldwell," one officer said firmly, "we need you to come with us." The groom stood frozen. His bride burst into tears. Cameras flashed as guests began recording everything. The most powerful real estate heir in New York was being arrested at his own wedding. And across the internet, millions of people were already watching. Nathaniel looked around desperately. "Who did this?" he demanded. No one answered. Aurora quietly placed her empty tray on a nearby table and turned toward the exit. As she walked past the blonde woman, their eyes met again. But this time the woman wasn't laughing. She looked confused, scared, and suddenly aware that the quiet waitress she mocked had been standing there the whole time. Aurora paused for a moment. Then she spoke softly. "Sometimes the people you call invisible are the ones watching everything." The woman said nothing. Aurora walked out of the ballroom and stepped into the cool New York night. Her phone buzzed continuously. Millions of views. Thousands of shares. News headlines spreading across the world. Waitress exposes billion-dollar wedding corruption. Caldwell empire collapses after viral wedding scandal. Aurora smiled faintly. For years she had worked quietly, unseen. Tonight the world finally saw the truth. And the people who once called her just a waitress. I would never forget her name again. Because Aurora Vance wasn't invisible anymore. She was the woman who destroyed an empire with a single click. And her story had just gone viral.